Should sex work be legal in the US? Why or why not? Please don't take this comment as gospel. I'm just a third year psych economics student. Just because I wrote a paper does not mean I'm an expert. This comment is expressly just my opinion based on the facts that I've read. I guess this what I'm writing about in the middle of the night, but I actually did a research paper on this topic a little while back. Places that have legalized sex work have seen a sharp decline in reports of sexual assault among both street workers and regular women. In Rhode Island they accidentally legalized prostitution for 6 years, and during that time reports of rape dropped 31%. In places like Australia, the Netherlands, and Nevada where they have legal brothels, reports of sex crimes in the general population have also decreased between 30 and 40% in the first few years, and 25% in the years after that. There's also a similar decrease in rates of STD transmissions, due to the health screenings and enforced condom use that customers have to go through at brothels. I've read a few papers attempting to disprove these facts, but their methodology seems flawed because they tend to interview registered sex offenders, rather than the general population, so there's a question of if the men being interviewed have an unnatural proclivity for sexual violence compared to normal people. The biggest concern with legalizing sex work is human trafficking. A lot of experts argue that legal brothels will need women to work, and if they can't fill the best legitimately, then they'll do it however they can. This seems like a reasonable fear, but there hasn't been enough research into the topic. From what I've researched in the past for school, a lot of the arguments against legal prostitution seem flawed and nitpicky. I'd say the social benefits outweigh the cons, and prostitution should be legalized. I really appreciate your thoughtful and detailed approach to this topic. I recently read an essay about the difficulties of defining consent and trafficking when money and sex are involved, written by sex worker and porn star Laura Liley. I agree that the arguments against legalized prostitution are flawed, and I deeply despise the fact that my opinion, as a sex worker myself, will likely never be heard nor respected by anyone who actually has influence over public policy. This is a fun thought experiment to most people in the comments here, but the legislation and forced puritanical views actually have an impact on my and my friends' daily life, and I wish more people would listen. This feels akin to asking should birth control be legal on our Askman. I lost my virginity to a sex worker in a part of Europe where it was legal and regulated. Later on, after I'd been in an abusive relationship and sexually assaulted by my ex, the red light district in Amsterdam gave me a way to get a sense of control over what I allowed my body be a part of, and what I consented to. You guys are remarkably important. Sex workers and the work that they do has helped me get through a lot of trauma that used to get in the way of physical things for me. I get infuriated when people don't listen to you guys, because it just seems like legislators have delusional perceptions of purity. They'll send people to war when they're barely more than a child, but for some reason they have an issue with what people consent to doing with each other in bed. Granted, in Amsterdam, the way that I saw men in the red light district look out the windows like it was a buffet was disgusting. I think that people forget that there are people on the other side of this work, and if it's going to be legalized, I think that people need to be taught a bit more about empathy. I hope you get to feel heard, and soon. You're important. As a human, you should be able to feel validated in your own humanity, and it's wrong for people to try to belittle you and your perspectives. I can only offer hope that things might change, but in America, I haven't seen hope be worth too much. It's not my hope that's worth anything. It's your conviction and constitution. I wish you the best of luck. I've lived mainly in Australia and New Zealand and prostitution is legal. Nothing bad happened when the law changed. It took sex workers off the street and into legal employment, which is safer and more regulated. Trafficking did not suddenly become more common. It's a good thing. Exactly. Plus, if I'm a legal prostitute, I will report any illegal, underground prostitution that is occurring because I have a financial incentive to do so. Technically it is legal as long as you film it and just pay for the videos, so then it is porn, which is fully legal. Why is it illegal to sell something that is perfectly legal to give away for free? Selling is legal. Fucking is legal. Why is selling fucking not legal? It should be decriminalized, and there should be laws put in place to protect sex workers. Yes, arresting people for selling their bodies makes no sense. To function in this society, you already have to give about everything else up anyways. Also don't see the logic behind it. It is an unfortunate reality that many sex workers join the industry not because they want to, but simply because they need to make ends meet. It should be decriminalized, not legalized. Legalization creates means testing barriers for entry, much like in other industries, in the form of taxing, licensing, and further regulation that allow aspiring sex workers trying to make ends meet to be manipulated by pimps that can sort out all the paperwork for them. Decriminalization gives more autonomy to sex workers to decide the terms of their own employment. Under legalization, sex work is controlled by the government and is legal only under certain state-specified conditions. Decriminalization involves the removal of all prostitution-specific laws, although sex workers and sex work businesses must still operate within the laws of the land, as must any businesses. Edit. OFC legalization is the ideal end goal, but decriminalization is a better stepping stone for sex workers in the meantime. The industry will always persist regardless of legislation, so decriminalization currently seems to be the best option for harm reduction for sex workers. It's a weird spot for me. I would prefer to see decriminalization instead of legalization. Not on any moral grounds, but rather who typically is involved in sex work. Many sex workers are in the industry due to a lack of ability to gain or retain other current legal work. If legalization happens, we won't see prostitution like it is now. It'll be back to a brothel style. Many of the same challenges that sex workers face in retaining a legal non-sex work job will work its way into that industry. With decriminalization, current sex workers would be able to continue on with their work but have the ability to report crimes against them made by johns or pimps to the law without the fear of legal action being taken against themselves. Everyone is going on about how sex work is going to magically become safer as soon as it's legalized, which may be true, to an extent, but look at porn. It is extremely unhealthy for the actor and the viewer. Again, to an extent, it leads to a ton of human trafficking, and it's run almost exclusively by huge corporations. Honestly, I think it should be legal just because I don't believe the government should control this kind of thing, and I believe it will make it a little safer for prostitutes who are desperate. But let's not kid ourselves into thinking that most prostitution is progressive and feminist, and not a shady industry that preys on young, desperate girls with nowhere else to go. There are some serious repercussions that no one seems to mention. By creating a society where selling your body becomes one of the best options for, mostly, women to get money, you create a very bad society. To name a few of the issues, selling intimacy creates a distorted population. See Japan. Economical disbalance between people having normal work and sex work. Less incentive for women to study meaningful subjects or become erudite. Strengthen gap between men and women. Just take a look at what prostitution did to countries like Thailand and Laos. There's quite a large percent of shop owners and landlords there who earned that money through a couple of years in prostitution. I don't think that it sets a good precedent for an economy to be built on these morals. Women can earn so much through prostitution for their entire family that it's estimated that up to 14% of the GDP of those countries is from the sex industry, and it might honestly be even higher, as for many tourists one of the draws of the country are its sex workers. Another example is Japan, where it's estimated that 10% of women in their 20s have appeared in the sex industry. I want women to study and bring something meaningful to societies instead of serving men. I don't inherently have anything against the industry, as I support people having the freedom to choose what they want to do. It is something, however, important to understand what the repercussions for society at large are. I'd only support this if everything earned through this is put straight back into education. Education obviously providing more options of success for people prepared to get downvoted to hell. Sex work is extremely harmful and dangerous, and it shouldn't be a career people aspire to have. There are so many inherent risks to health, well-being, and safety, and I don't think legalizing it really solves any of the issues societies have with prostitution. That being said, prostitutes shouldn't be the ones punished when they're already such a vulnerable group. Instead, those who purchase their services should be punished because they're the ones creating the demand for sex work and they're the ones exploiting sex workers. If you decrease the demand for the service, then the service becomes less profitable and fewer people join that industry. To be honest, it's a very complicated issue that can't really be answered in just one comment. I would say no, majority of sex workers aren't doing it of their own volition but are forced into it either by situation or literally, since sexual slavery is very prevalent. Legalizing sets up rules and regulations, but these can end up being dehumanizing and still be used against sex workers working outside of the confines of the law, which they likely will. I have my issues with the ethics and morality of sex work, but even with that aside, legalization is still not as good as it's chalked up to be. Amnesty International did an absolutely amazing report around 4-ish years ago on this. Hard to say because as far as I'm aware, a majority of sex workers are doing it unwillingly, out of desperation, or because drugs. I think the only way it should be legalized is if it's a literal job being hosted by a company with strict regulations and stuff, also having to make the person get certified, verified with full background checks, drug tests, etc. The whole sex industry is already fucked up and corrupt as it is. Sex buyers are the driving force behind sex traffickers. Normalizing the act of buying increases the demand for sex workers, which incentivizes sex traffickers. Places with legal prostitution have higher rates of sex trafficking. The only ethical position is to be against sex work. Legalizing it puts all our friends and families at greater risk of being sex trafficked. Likewise, pornography is already the largest form of legal sex work and it is a blight on society. Kids as young as 5 are being exposed to it and end up with mental disorders and are put at increased risk of sexually abusing other kids and suicide. Children imitate their adult role models. The commercialization of sex is a direct causal factor in early age sexualization as they imitate their sex worker role models. Being pro-sex work is the anti-masker equivalent of sex trafficking, early age sexualization, child-on-child sexual abuse, mental illness, and suicide. Opposing the commercialization of sex would reduce these things. Holy shit. The only comment I find with a good reasoning behind the position, and it's sorting by controversial. It seems like there is a heavy liberal, not left-wing, consensus on sex work. I think it's just the logical next step on the society we are building under this premises. You basically sell your time by working for a salary, then we have sex-positive movements, which I'm mostly in favor of by the way, that attempt to take away the sacred or transcendental sphere traditionally associated with sex. So the next logical step is, why wouldn't I want to capitalize on something ultimately banal like sex when I'm expected to do so with everything else in my life, including my precious time? No one seems to question the first premise. Why should we yield every single aspect of our lives to the market? So far only laws that protect citizens from other humans, government or companies have worked. What I mean by this is that if someone wants to murder someone, does the person care about law? No, I'm not saying murder should be legal, but it doesn't stop these things from happening. So yeah, make it legal that way the worker would be more protected, and the ones that snap out of sheer know nothing but with money could just throw money at the problem. Also, denying someone to choose a career path like that is a strip of freedom. If I want to get paid by using my rooster, I should be able to, otherwise freedom is a lie. I think if it's official, taxed and monitored, not in a creepy way, for safety and security, then yes. If that's the career you need to go into, then it shouldn't be stopped, but I also think that it should be an official profession, so it's safer for everyone involved. To be a patron, you should be checked before going in, almost like when wanting to buy a gun. A background check, a stability check, pat down, etc. should be done in order to make sure that the workers are kept safe. In the same token, if you wish to become a sex worker, you should have the same done to you, in order to keep patrons safe. The rooms should have an actual security detail to them, So if something is going wrong, for any reason someone will come and assist in, say, dealing with a violent patron or worker, or if a medical issue has acted up, they should know how to deal with that. The tax is to make sure the businesses still pay their way, and the whole thing about safety is because the sex worker industry is a dangerous line of work. I just want those who want to be one, or even worse, need to be one, are safe and secure. TLDR, yes, if it becomes a lot safer and official. Yes. The answer is simple if you look back in time. My master's thesis is a written history on one of the largest red light districts, based off of the town size, that operated in the US in the early 20th century. Everyone operating inside of the legal district had to submit to health checks, paid for by the city, and their houses had to pass certain standards. There is written and oral testimony that madams were fiercely protective of the women that worked for them, sometimes going as far as not even allowing the patrons to curse in front of the girls. The women were protected by either, or both, the brothel's bouncer or the police that patrolled the area. So not only were the workers taken care of, it kept STD rates down, and provided the city with a major financial boost. At one point outside investigators came to town to determine why there was such a large disproportion of money to residents in the banks. The income that the district generated was far more than people paying for sex. It created a booming real estate industry, skyrocketed alcohol sales, which the city could tax. It required constant help from outside industries such as laundry maids and errand boys, since the women that worked in the district were not typically allowed to shop downtown. If you're not okay legalizing simply for an individual's rights, you should really look into the amount of revenue possible from a legal red light district. The legalization of cannabis in some US states over the last few years is an excellent example of the untapped potential that's right at our fingertips, waiting. The extra taxes made off legalizing sex work could pay for better education, medical care, etc. The options are endless. During my research I found a man who was both doctor and coroner that lived before, during, and after the district. He was a part of the movement that ended up shutting the district down because he thought it would make the women change occupations. 2 decades after the closure, he wrote how wrong he was. Crime dispersed through the city, taking STDs with it. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.